So we'll be moving on to a collard green saag paneer, which is our spin on a traditionally Indian dish. Saag meaning, with our research, something that is a dark leafy green, which can vary depending on what region or where the recipe idea is coming from. And then paneer being the kind of cheese that we are using that'll be our source of calcium and vitamin D today. We chose collard greens as our dark leafy green because it contains nearly 3 times the amount of calcium as you would from a same serving size as broccoli and kale, which is what we usually think of when we think of greens that have calcium. But actually collard greens, although not all of us may be familiar with how to use them, myself included, is actually quite a good source of calcium.
I love that little inspiration of collard greens. So when we were talking about the recipes, Carmen suggested, let's do a saag paneer and use the collard greens. Mm-hmm. Like, I've had saag paneer, I love saag paneer. It's always usually been with spinach, which is delicious. But the collard greens, we tested, and I didn't know the point on the calcium that is the highest.
Yeah.
But because it is a little bit more robust in its texture, you get a completely different experience. Really, really nice. But you can use other greens in this recipe as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we're going to be using the collard greens. We're using paneer as well, and that's where we're going to start. So is everyone familiar with paneer? No. Okay. So if you've never had it before, it is essentially like a pressed cottage cheese, right? Typically very mild. Some of them do come seasoned and salted. Mm-hmm. Usually it's pretty mild. If you've had cheese curds, in terms of like a squeak sort of cheese, it would be similar to that texture-wise. But what's nice is it doesn't melt like a typical cheese. So it holds its shape really, really well. And that's why it's wonderful in this dish. So what we're going to do is, I have a little bit of oil I'm going to add to my pan here. And I want to give it just a quick sear. Bottle out of the way.
Can I help with the soup?
I think we're okay. Is there anything on paneer, protein-wise?
Well, we are choosing the paneer, when we're focusing in on, bone health, calcium, vitamin D, and protein. Those were the nutrients that we were talking about. And actually, when we're looking at dairy products like paneer, which is, like Jerry mentioned, a form of pressed cottage cheese, we have both the calcium and the vitamin D pieces because vitamin D actually helps our body absorb more of the calcium that's coming from our food through the gut. So it's kind of like they're helping each other to actually get absorbed into the body and used to support all our different body functions, including building and maintaining bones. Now, when we're talking about calcium, some interesting facts is that it is actually the most abundant mineral found in our body. And so calcium is stored in our bones and it helps to strengthen them. So if our body doesn't get enough calcium or cannot get enough calcium from the diet, it will start taking the calcium that's stored in our bones. So what that would mean for weaker bones or put us at higher risk for fractures or broken bones. Which none of us want. So by supporting the amount of calcium that we're getting from our diets, that can help retain the strength and the integrity of our bones.
Wonderful. All right, so we're searing the paneer here. Just keep an eye. You might get some splashback. I apologize, Carmen, if some of it did hit you, but because of the water, some of the water of the paneer, there's not a lot, but a little bit will come out. You just want to keep an eye on that. But essentially what we want to do is give it a little bit of color. So, zoom. Don't fail me now. There we go. All right, so can you see that color on there? That's seared. That's what we want. That's going to give it some really nice texture. Getting a little bit of caramelization on there. So, and you can do this in a pot. I have like a larger kind of skillet here. You can do this in a pot as well. And we just want to get a little bit of crust, a little bit of color. It doesn't have to be perfect, but once we start getting that color, flip it. Doesn't have to be on all sides, but if you get it on a couple sides, that would be great. If you don't want to use paneer, if I guess you have a dairy allergy or something, you can sub this with like a firm tofu or like an extra firm tofu, and that will treat it pretty much the exact same way.
And nutritionally too, the tofu, which is from soy, would also be a source of protein, calcium, and vitamin D. So if you were to swap that for whatever reason, whether it's tolerance, preference, or religious reasons, that would totally be an option. Yeah, and it looks like that way of searing it would really crisp up the texture.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we have the paneer going. Now we're going to move on to the greens to prep them. Now, like I mentioned, usually you would see, usually when I've had saag paneer, and you'll see it, it's a great Indian dish. I guess it depends where, if it's a northern Indian version or southern Indian version. I find that sometimes in the northern Indian dishes, mustard greens will be used, which is another green that you can absolutely use. Like I mentioned, today we're going to be using these collards. Has anyone used collard greens before? Okay. Texture-wise, very similar to cabbage, so a little bit more robust. Okay, like a kale, like a cabbage. It's not as delicate as a spinach or even like a chard, so it does take a little bit more time to cook. The stems on here, they're pretty fibrous. The small part you don't have to worry about removing, but the big part will just get a little chewy, will break down as well. So what I like to do to prep it is you just sort of pinch where the leaf starts here. I'm working the best I can with the directing over here as well. Pinch where that stem and the leaf start, and then you can sort of just tear it, so middle to start, and then rip it off like that. So you sort of pinch it and then pull the leaf off, and that way you have the stem. And you can use this, you can save this for veg stalks if you want. We'll cook it down, and so the same thing.
That methodology is a bit reminiscent of like kale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you who work with kale.
Yeah, ripping that stem out. And then to slice it, you can sort of roll it up. I just find this a little bit easier. So just roll it all up, and then you can just run your knife through it. And because it's sort of tight like a roll here, you'll get these really nice sort of shreds of the collard. All right. Now, keep in mind, if you cooked leafy greens before, you'll know they cook down to reduce quite a bit of that volume. So this will cook down to probably like a quarter left. So if you feel like it's a lot with this large bowl, it will cook down to a very, very small amount. Okay, so if you need a larger quantity or a larger portion size, then just increase the amount of greens that you want. All right, so the sear is perfect. We got a pan shot. Yes, we can. A pan shot here. So the sear is nice. So I'm going to remove the paneer from the bowl. And yeah.
So when we were thinking about creating these recipes, I was trying to think of some other non-conventional ingredients and foods that might be supportive of bone health, but when kind of trying to think of what are the traditional foods that we think of are supportive for bones, that are a source of calcium, vitamin D, or protein, can you think of any other foods that might come to the top of mind? Like any certain dairy foods? Yogurt, yeah. So any forms of yogurt, literally any dairy, like milk, drinking milk, cheeses. Those are all very conventional sources of protein, calcium, and vitamin D. Although in more recent times, whether there have been allergies or intolerances to dairy, whether it's like a temporary intolerance where the gut is just not so much as happy with dairy or lactose, or if it's a more longer-term sensitivity to dairy, kind of opting for other options, like we mentioned, maybe the tofu, maybe some dark leafy greens as other options to support the body getting some of the calcium, vitamin D, and protein that it needs.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to start with our aromatics now to finish this dish. A little bit of onion in there. And again, you don't have to change the pan at all. You can just put it all in the same pan. So a little bit of onion. I minced a little bit of garlic and ginger. You can use, if you don't have fresh, you can use dried as well. Garlic and ginger in there. And then for spices, we have garam masala, which is wonderful spice you'll see in South Asian cooking. It's a combination of different spices. For those that have taken some of our classes, I think you're familiar with this one because I've used it before. You'll see cinnamon, you'll have cinnamon, some cumin, there's some coriander, some ginger, some clove. So it has this almost like baking spice sort of feel to it. Really, really nice and warm, very fragrant. I'm going to add like a heaping tablespoon in there. And then I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of turmeric as well. So this is ground turmeric. Now, in traditional Saag Paneers, you'll find other spices added, maybe a little extra cumin, a little extra coriander, maybe some chilies in there as well. So you can definitely customize this. I'm keeping it to just these two. And then give it a stir. For those here live, you can probably start to smell the spices soon. For those at home, you'll have to just imagine it. Maybe next time, come join us live.
Or make it yourself.
Yes, or make it yourself. Sure. All right. So while it's getting nice and fragrant, we've prepped our greens. You can cook this for like a minute or two. Once you really smell the spices, we can go ahead and add our greens. Now again, keep in mind, with the collard greens, they're going to take a little bit longer to cook. If you're using collard greens, if you're using kale, you're looking at about maybe 7-8 minutes in terms of the cook time. If you're using spinach, maybe like 2-3 minutes, so a lot less time in there. I'm gonna add all of it. This is gonna cook down. It looks like a lot. It's gonna cook down to quite a bit. We'll just stir this through. And now maybe regretting the size of the pot that I'm using, maybe go for something a little bigger. I think we'll manage. Just a small mess. All right. Now it will start to release some of its own water naturally, but to just kickstart it, you can add a few tablespoons to the pot, and we'll probably circle it down.
Yeah, depending on what kind of green we're using, maybe spinach would be a bit more watery and release a bit more of its own water, whereas it looks like the collard greens not so much.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just takes a little bit more time. Mm-hmm. That's all. All right. So once you give it a nice little stir, get a lid that fits. I already know mine doesn't really fit, but it's okay. I just want to trap some of that moisture in there, and we're going to go ahead and let that wilt, okay, for a few minutes.
Very nice. Great.
And you mentioned, actually, Carmen, I have a question. So you mentioned that collard greens have one of the highest forms of calcium.
The calcium, yes.
For dark leafy greens.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can, because I know with some, I guess, plant-based nutrients, is there anything that you can combine it with to help with the sort of bioavailability of it?
Yeah, so we've actually done it is pairing it with the dairy source, which is also a source of vitamin D. I'd mentioned that it would actually increase the absorption of the calcium into our bodies as the food is traveling through our gut, once we've enjoyed our meal. And so actually when we have calcium and vitamin D at the same time in the same meal, we're actually increasing the absorption of calcium into our bodies by up to 30 to 40%. as opposed to having just calcium on its own. So
Yeah,
that's
love
all.
that. Has anyone tried Saag Paneer before? No, this will be a first? Okay. Again, not the traditional version. We're going to get a lot of comments like, this is not how my mom makes it.
No.
Completely understand that.
Yeah.
But this is, now usually when you have it, when I've had it before, after the greens are wilted, they're usually broken down either through like blending it with some extra liquid, so it's a little saucier. And you would eat it with like rice or like some naan, and it'd be almost like this sort of like scoopable kind of dish. I've had it a couple times where it's just left a little whole, a little bit rustic. So that's how I'm doing it today, because I love the texture of the collard greens and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to break that down. But if you want more of the traditional like this preparation of it, after it's really nice and tender, nice and soft, you can blend it.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's almost like a side with a starch as opposed to like a stew today.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Once it is wilted down and it's cooked to your liking, and you sort of cook until it's nice and tender, we're going to go ahead and add the yogurt to it. Now the yogurt, we're just using some plain yogurt, higher protein yogurt, the Greek yogurt. What I'm going to suggest is, because yogurt tends to be lower in fat, it can split if you add it to heat. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It'll look curdled because you're adding it to heat. So what I would do is take it off the heat. Once you're ready, once it's nice and tender, once the greens are nice and tender, we're going to take it off of the heat, and then we're going to stir and mix our yogurt in to give it this really, really nice creaminess. Okay, so I'm going to get the TV version. So we're not waiting another 5 minutes to cook the greens. I made a bit of a bigger batch, so you have an idea. So this is with the yogurt mixed in, and then the seared paneer added back in there, and you have this just really, really nice sort of, because of the collards, again, they're a little bit more robust. You have this amazing sort of texture of the greens with that creaminess of the yogurt, and then that seared paneer, which will give it some really, really nice texture, and then, like Carmen mentioned, extra protein in there as well, right?
Yeah. And the dairy yogurt will do that as well.
This looks like an advertisement for Liberté, but it's not. I'll twist it to the side. And yeah, that's it. That's our second recipe.
Wonderful.
Our version of Saag Paneer with collard greens.